everybody. Nice to see everyone. We got some familiar faces. We got Elvis here today. What an honor. That's pretty cool. So how's everybody doing? I know we had the kind of long weekend. So today I thought it would be a good idea to talk about consumable parts. So I've seen a lot of questions both on the Facebook group, online, and just through support tickets that I've been a part of about consumable parts in general. So I thought it would be a good thing to go over, kind of refresh everybody's memory on what's going on with the consumable parts, what qualifies as a consumable part, and how long you expect them to last, things like that. So that's kind of the goal for today. So I put together a little presentation for the first part, and then we'll talk about some other stuff a little bit later on about ink flow. All right, yeah, so we got the consumable parts. So first thing I wanted to do is go ahead and define what a consumable part is. So consumable parts are defined as items contained within customers' equipment, which would be your guys' equipment, which are consumed at a regular interval during normal use of the equipment. So that's kind of a really important definitive factor. So that kind of lets you know what separates consumable parts from non-consumable parts. So parts that are considered consumable on the FreeJet printer would be things like the pump with the capping station and the wiper blade there, the dampers, ink line clips, and the ink tube assembly that the clips are on. The head is a consumable part after the 1-year warranty is up. The O-rings between the ink tube assembly and the dampers, those would be considered consumable. The waste ink pad and the soak pad underneath the pump, the ink lines in general, and the ink bottles themselves and the fittings for the ink lines. So let's go ahead and move on to the next page here. So the pump unit, that's going to be part of your daily maintenance, is to keep your capping station clean, to make sure that you get the best print quality and that you get the best protection for your print head when it goes and docks with that capping station. So it's all about the capping station when it comes to the print head. So this part is really important to keep very clean so that it can make a nice seal with your print head when you wet cap it. The better you clean it, the more thoroughly you'll be able to do priming. Head cleans will be more effective. And like I said, your wet cap is going to be more effective as well. When your printer's not in use, the pump will maintain the cleaning solution in place to keep the print head in good condition. The pump usually lasts 6 to 12 months when properly maintained. Typically, the part that will break on the pump, a lot of the times it's going to be in that picture in the bottom right. You can see those white gears. Typically, some of those gears will break. Either that or they'll get clogged with ink, or some other problem with the pump can occur too, but those are the common ones that I'm aware of. And those can happen from either improper maintenance or just the lifespan of the pump. So the next one is going to be the dampers. So to get the most out of your dampers, you want to keep your ink delivery system clean and make sure that you wash out your white ink bottles every few months. We've actually, I didn't notice that phrasing was that way. We actually advise that as an annual maintenance. So once a year, you want to go ahead and clean out your ink bottles. So you would just pour the ink back into their original bottles, rinse it out with water, dump it out, make sure it's nice and dry before you return ink back into those bottles. That way you can make sure that there's not excessive settled ink at the bottom of those bottles, because the dampers work like filters for the ink and they protect the print head. So these ones are going to be replaced as needed. In my experience, it can be as short as 3 months or as much as like 9-10 months. In my experience, I haven't seen any dampers last much longer than that unless the printer's not being used that much. The ink line clips. So I've got this one kind of in combination with the ink tube assembly shown in the bottom left there. So that's the ink tubes that the clips go on. So they're kind of a package deal there as far as this slide. So you want to make sure that with the clips, you move them up and down during your startup or during your shutdown, whatever your preference, and move them on that tubing so that you're not clipping in the same place every day, because that'll really damage those tubings a lot faster. So you can get a lot more lifespan by moving those clips around. And you'll generally get better ink flow because the shape of the tubing is maintained better. In the case that you break those clips, they are fairly easy to replace. So it would just be a matter of, if you've ever taken out the dampers before, just unhooking the damper, you slide it off, and you put a new one back on. In a pinch, you don't even have to do that. Let me get this kind of angled nicely so you guys can see. So in worst case, if it really comes down to like a time crunch and your clip breaks, you can clip it from outside of the tube. You don't have to thread the tube through it. You can kind of just loop it around and make do until you have time to actually take the damper out and do it the right way. So you can do it that way. That's not going to have any negative effect on the ink line. It's the same as being clipped normally, it's just at a slight angle. So that's maybe a little bonus information that we didn't plan to really talk about today, but you might be able to apply that at some point possibly. So let's go to the next slide here. Print head. This is everybody's favorite. So print head is the part that will need to be replaced over a period of time. However, with the wet cap system, proper use and maintenance, the original print head can last well beyond the other consumables on this list. So that's quite true. Maybe the exception is the clips. It's kind of rare to break the clips, so the clips might outlast your print head in most cases. So like I said at the very beginning, the print head does come with the 1-year warranty against manufacturing defects. So it wouldn't be really considered a consumable part until the 1-year mark when that warranty expires. So after that is when it would be considered consumable. So really good maintenance on the print head is important. So in the bottom right picture there, you see the nozzle plate. So that's looking at the bottom of the print head. There's 2 little metal brackets there that's really important for you to keep clean. But one area that people really neglect, in my experience, are the little divot channels at the top and bottom of the nozzle plate. I don't know if we're able to zoom in further into this, if we can. Yeah, so those little channels at the top and bottom of the print head nozzle plate shown in the picture, that's going to be a very important part to keep clean. Over time, that'll get built up as well. You'll get some stringy residue come off of there when you clean it properly. So just keep that area in mind as well. Sometimes also with the print head carriage that the head sits in, the little ramp to the side of it that leads up to the nozzle plate, that area gets very dirty as well. And since it's black plastic, it blends in with the ink really well. So I want you to pay special attention to that area too, to make sure you keep the head in good shape. So I think we can go ahead and move on. So additional consumable parts. These ones don't have specific lifespan to expect. It's kind of just as needed for these ones. So the O-rings help to form a really good seal between the ink tube assembly and the dampers. They don't break very easily, but they are lost very easily. So when you're working down there with the dampers and you're changing stuff out, it is quite easy to lose those O-rings. So do keep that in mind. Keep a good grip on it and you won't lose it, because they are kind of a pain to put back on that tubing. So keep a good grip on those. Waste ink pads, so that's going to be opposite side from your capping station. Those need to be replaced as the ink buildup completely soaks through the pad and the ink level in the tray begins to rise. So at a point you'll see that it's kind of a puddle of ink in there. It won't be kind of a sludge anymore, and it'll just be a liquid in there. And that's when you want to go ahead and change that pad out and clean out that area. So that's going to be as needed. Depending on the use of the printer, it'll be more frequent or less frequent. And then same thing kind of goes for the waste pad that's underneath the capping station and underneath the pump rather. So that's going to be replaced as needed. The easiest time to replace it will be when you're actually replacing the pump. Since you already have the pump out, it's easy access to that area. So I would suggest having those handy for when it's time to replace the pump. You can go ahead and just take care of it all in one go. Another one that's as needed, not very frequent at all, actually replacing the ink lines themselves from the damper to the bottle, or in the case of the Plus, from the bottle to like the Y splitters, depending on where the damage or clog is. Last one that would be considered a consumable that I at least have on this list is going to be the bottles themselves, the ink bottles. So the main damage that I've seen in the past is damage to the fitting here, where the ink tube connects to the bottle. Commonly during like shipping or something like that, it'll get bumped and damaged right here. So when you're transporting the machine, it's important to make sure this area is protected as well, because replacing those ink lines is a pain. I don't know if anybody in the chat has ever needed to do that, but it's not fun, I will tell you that. So try to avoid damage to those ink lines. The last thing that I wanted to kind of go over is kind of less of a structured PowerPoint. You know, I don't know if you guys can see this block of text that I've got in my PowerPoint. Basically, I want to talk to you guys about diagnosing ink flow problems. So this is what we're working with. I'm not going to leave this up on the screen because that's a little excessive. That's mainly for me as a reminder in case I need it. But basically, with ink flow, if you have a poor nozzle check or you have some kind of ink flow problem that you've noticed, if you do 2 head cleans and a nozzle check and it's not good, you would do the prime, the 2 head cleans and the nozzle check, and if there's still no improvement, then it's time to diagnose your ink flow issue. So always you want to start from the back here. So start from the bottle and work your way forward, because it's basically going from easy to solve to more difficult and more involved. So you always want to rule out the easy stuff first with diagnosis. So if you have a Plus with the white bottles, you have an additional thing to consider is the circulation system. So you want to check your ink levels, make sure everything looks okay. With the Plus, I want you to go ahead and run your circulation and examine your white ink lines while you do that. So if the ink lines, you see like gaps or air just going into the bottle and then leaving through the tube again, then you have air in the lines, and that's diagnosed your issue, and that's pretty easy to fix for the most part. If everything looks good back here and the ink lines look good back here, then you're going to go ahead and move forward to, let me make sure. So we're going to move forward to the ink lines here. Let me kind of scooch this guy here. Yeah, that's pretty good. So we're going to look here and make sure that, I think I want to come around to this side. And we're going to look at the ink lines in this area and make sure everything looks normal. If something looks off, then that kind of gives you a clue of where your issue might be. With the Plus, you're going to have those Y splitters, the little filter guys that are on the tubes right here before it goes into that little snake for the tubing. If everything looks good there, nothing is looking out of place, then I want you to look at your short ink tubes here, the ink tube assemblies, and the clips. Make sure that if you have the clip closed by accident, go ahead and open it up. You've found your issue. If that's not the case, go ahead and move your clip and massage it where it was clipped. We talked about that earlier in the presentation. Just want to make sure that you massage that crimp that the clip makes every time that you move that clip, because over time it will basically seal off that tubing. So that's pretty important to keep in mind. So check that. Next would be your dampers. So at this point, if you're not familiar with changing dampers or anything like that, that's when you would want to get connected with a tech support agent. Taking it out is pretty simple, and you would just take the syringe that comes with the printer and connect to the damper and see if you can get ink flow through it. If you can get ink flow through it and it's pretty steady, then you can largely rule out the damper as an issue. You do want to make sure that when you are checking the dampers, when you go to put it back, you don't want to leave a whole bunch of excess ink down there in the print head carriage because you can have the ink leak into the head cables. And if any of you guys in the chat have ever had issues with the print head cables, you know how much of a pain that can be. And it gets expensive too if it's outside of warranty. So you want to make sure that you're really careful with that. Anytime you're working with the dampers, have a cloth around paper towels or something to catch that extra ink. From there, you would examine the pump, make sure everything looks good with the pump. And if the pump looks okay and nothing looks out of place with the pump, that's when you would suspect the print head. So print head is always going to be the last option when it comes to diagnosing ink flow issues, because that's going to be ultimately the most expensive part in the ink flow system. So you want to leave that for last. So anybody have questions about anything that we've covered so far? Michael's saying no. Betty, Victor, William, everybody good on that? I know this is kind of basic, but it's good to make sure that these things are covered, because sometimes we'll reveal things that maybe you had overlooked initially. This might save you some headache trying to get connected with someone on tech support when you might be able to just take care of it yourself, because that's really ideal. Okay, so anyone else have any kind of issues that you want to bring up? That's pretty much everything that I've got. We actually cruised through that a lot faster than I was expecting. So if we have any other questions, anything else that you want to talk about, you can go ahead and unmute yourself, and we can address some questions, do a little Q&A. How's everyone doing? Doesn't have to be specifically what causes the random whirring the machine sometimes makes. Okay, so a little bit vague. Does it sound, I don't know if the microphone's going to pick this up. Does it sound like that?
No, this is Victor.
Yep.
It's not the circulation.
Oh, okay. Yep.
It's the band on the back that moves everything back and forth. And sometimes when you want to start a head clean, or you've done all your processes and you've redocked the print head and you turn off the machine, it just goes into this loud whirring thing where the band just spins very quickly for about 4 seconds, which feels like an eternity.
Yeah, that's a really loud noise. I know exactly what you're talking about now. Okay, so with that band, that's the band that kind of pulls the print head across the gantry. So it'll do that when the print head has resistance, and it'll release the belt to spin free to preserve the motors. So that's why it does that. So that means you either have an issue with your encoder strip. Maybe your encoder strip is dirty and it kind of lost track of its place and got stuck in some place. Alternatively, your print carriage bar may need some grease if it's having resistance issues. And if those are okay, it could be your pump. It could be an indication that your pump is starting to go. If it's not actioning the capping station and wiper blade properly, it might not be getting fully out of the way when the head tries to move. If the capping station, the pump unit is newer, I would have you connect with tech support and make sure that everything's looking good on there. There's a little screw on the side here that you can manually action the pump. So it may be that you need to get in there with a screwdriver here. You do the function up, and once the head is undocked, you can, there's a little arrow engraved into the side of the metal here. And if you just do that screw in that direction, you'll see the capping station lower. And then when you hit function, that may help as well. So if there's going to be any case where it's just kind of out of sync, that would take care of it. If it's specifically at shutdown, I do know that when you do your shutdown routine and you press and hold the power button, sometimes it'll do that. The best practice when you do your shutdown routine, instead of pressing and holding the power button till it beeps, you can just turn it off with the switch on the back, wait 5 seconds, turn it back on, and you won't have that issue. Anyone else? Yeah, sure thing. Working with DTF, I have one logo that is a deep teal that is printing almost black. I'm hesitant to mess with any settings in the DTF environment. Any color setting adjustment ideas? First thing I'd have you take a look at is your nozzle check. Assuming the nozzle check is okay, I'd have you take a look at the graphic next and see what color format the graphic is in. If it's not in CMYK, that might be giving you some funky color results depending on exactly what color it's trying to hit. Apart from those, I can't really imagine any other possibilities. It's not very common that a color will print completely different. Usually it comes pretty close. So if either of those things don't really resolve the issue, Tiffany, I'd have you connect with tech support as well and see what's going on there, and email me as well. So you guys should all have my email by now if you've seen me a couple of times here. It's Brian, B-R-Y-A-N, at OmniPrintOnline.com. So always let me know if you have any issues. If it's something easy that I can address for you, I'll do so. If it's something a little more complicated, I'll make sure you get connected with someone who can solve those complicated issues. What do you do when you have a head strike? Cool. So with head strikes, that's another good one. So with head strikes, what you would want to do, stop printing. A lot of people, when they get a head strike, they'll wait until the end of the day to go ahead and do whatever they're going to do. Some people will just soak the head in super nozzle cleaner, and that's really not the best thing. So basically when you get a head strike, the reason it's bad is because the head is making contact with something typically that has pre-treat on it. The pre-treat is meant to dry out your ink when it touches the shirt. That's why it doesn't like puddle. So if that's getting into the print head, it's gonna have that reaction inside the little itty bitty nozzles on the head. So it's really bad. So the first priority is to get that pre-treat off of the print head. So first thing that you want to do, stop printing. Take this guy off of your printing bed here. You're going to go ahead and do function up. You're going to get some super nozzle cleaner on a clean cloth, and you're going to go ahead and, I say dab, it might be a different term depending on what your terminology would be, but it's just going to be straight up and down onto the nozzle plate with that super nozzle cleaner on the cloth. So you're going to do that a couple of times. Make sure that you get that super nozzle cleaner directly onto there, and then once you've done that, go ahead and clean up your capping station, do your maintenance around the nozzle plate, and then dock the print head in the super nozzle cleaner for an hour. You're going to basically do your normal shutdown, and then once the hour is up, you're going to go ahead and do a prime with all of the lines open for 10 seconds, do your 2 head cleanings, and print your nozzle check and see how it looks. If everything's good, you're good to go. If it's not looking good, then you'll have some more specific channels to go ahead and work with from there. So if it's a specific one that has a poor nozzle check, then that's the ones you would address from there on. I see Josh got his camera going there. Nice to see you, Josh.
Yeah, I got a quick question for you. So, are they working on any type of updates to make these guys run a little bit faster? Is that something that we can actually do, or OmniPrint himself try to do something to make the prints a little bit faster?
Yeah, so we do have the production mode that does sacrifice the print quality. So it prints 1440 by 720 in order to take larger steps when it's printing. Apart from that, it's pretty much mechanically set that you don't want to print too fast, or you're going to start sacrificing registration or other details. So mechanically, there's not a whole lot that we can do. The printer's going to print as fast as it goes. If you want to print faster, then you would do the production mode there.
Production mode, yep. Okay.
And then it looks like we heard back from Mario and Robert. Is there a way to recover lost nozzles on a nozzle check? My white has a few missing ones on the lines. So as far as the nozzle check, if your nozzle check is poor, what you want to do, if it's one in particular and it's quite bad, wet cap with that super nozzle cleaner and leave the problem line unclipped. That'll allow the cleaning solution to come up a little bit more into the print head. You don't want to do this very often. You can have issues with the print head becoming delaminated. and it'll break down the print head a little bit faster. So do be careful with how frequently you use that technique, because a super nozzle cleaner is more concentrated, so it will be a little more rough on the print head, but it will help to break down that ink in situations like this. Okay, all right. I see Michael joined the chat. Hey, how you going? Okay, so I think that's pretty good, so let's call it there.
Okay, I got another one for you.
Oh, okay, Joshua?
So now let's say that I can't find my printer on my computer. I've got a new computer. I'm trying to download the software on this new computer. Now,
Okay.
how do I got the RIP software on here, but I can't get the printer to come up?
So as in the direct, you've installed the direct rip, but when you go to select the port, it's not detecting the printer?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Did you install the driver for the printer?
That's what I'm having issues installing.
Okay. All right. What version of Windows are you using?
10.
Okay. First thing I would have you do, check for updates. If there's any pending updates, that can interfere with driver stuff pretty
Yep,
easily.
did that.
Okay. Let me connect with you afterwards. That might be something that's a little more involved that I would want to try a couple different things. One would be just try installing the driver again. Whenever you're working, just in case you weren't aware, whenever you're working with the direct rip and trying to do a print, the power light on the printer has to be on, otherwise the computer won't pick it up. You also want to check your USB cable, try different USB ports on the computer, and then if all those things check out, you want to go ahead and turn the printer off, turn off your computer, and then turn the printer back on, and then turn your computer on, and see if you can get it to sync up that way. So if none of those things work, then you have my email as well. Let's get connected, and we can address that too.
Sounds good.
Okay. All right, I see Dennis and Patricia unmuted again. Do you have another question?
I got a question about as far as the ink air light on there.
Okay.
It always is flashing until you go in there, and then you have to like reset it, telling it it's got ink in there. Is there a way that can just be done away with?
Yeah, so if you're just printing normally, it'll happen automatically. If it's not happening automatically, then that's something that we should connect with tech support about. That might be an issue with one of your circuit boards here that handle that reset function.
Okay.
Commonly, it can get stuck when you're trying to do a head cleaning and it needs to do that ink chip reset. It can get stuck when you're doing that head cleaning from the drivers on the computer. And it'll prompt you to like buy ink. So with that, you can just do function and standby. I'll do it on here so that you guys can see. I don't have the ink light going currently, so you're just gonna have to take my word for it. I do need to turn on the control panel first. Give me 1 second here. So once this starts up, basically you're gonna press function and standby once at the same time. You'll notice the print head will scooch over maybe 2 inches. And then it'll just sit there. You press function standby again, and basically you're just manually doing the ink chip reset in the case that you need to do that. So it'll go something like this. So head moves over, and then function standby again, and that'll go ahead and reset that ink chip counter.
Well, that's a lot easier than the other way.
Yeah, so there's a variety of approaches to it. It kind of depends on what's going on. So if it's getting caught up with the head cleanings, then you can go ahead and do that. Alternatively, if you're just trying to do the feeding button for the head cleanings, it'll just do it automatically at that point. It won't prompt you on the computer at that point because you wouldn't have the driver open.
It's prompting me on the computer, and I go in there, and it takes about 5 minutes to run through it all.
Okay, yeah, definitely do the function standby in that case.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure thing. Okay, well, I think that'll be it for today. Any other questions that you guys have, go ahead and direct it to my email address. I'll get you all squared away and taken care of. Anything else that you need, we'll be back again next, and you guys have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye.